Hello and good morning, friends. Today we have ourselves a really gross and rainy day, but I want to talk to you about something that's super important. Today I want to talk to you about what happens when you buy an old home, like for example 1900s, sight unseen with no inspections, and you have no idea what you're working with. Let's talk a little bit about the do's, don'ts, and what could possibly go wrong while we take a look at the system on this property. So before we get started, the records indicate that the septic tank should be somewhere in this grassy area. Now I've already walked this area and I didn't find any kind of access point at the surface. Really, if anything, that just kind of sucks for me, not for anybody else. Finding the sewer is going to be really annoying just because the grass is kind of tall and it's pouring down rain. So the easiest way that we can do this is by going in through the access cap, which is going to look like this. You can see here that I have my camera in the sewer line. So you'll have your main stack vent right there, another access point right over here. And so by putting my camera through, I'm able to use my locator and a probe to figure out exactly where the septic tank is. So I'm gonna go ahead, find it real quick, and then I'll catch up with you in a few seconds. So I was actually incorrect. They do have a access point on the tank. It was just covered in all this grass. So now I just need to get my drill, pop this bad boy open, see if this is on the front or the back, and then we can hopefully see what's going on in the actual tank itself. All right, so this is actually now gonna be on the rear of the tank. So that's good. We can see the baffle is in place and that looks like it's in pretty good shape. So the next step is we have to run water through the system to make sure everything's draining correctly. So the baffle in the tank is actually going to be basically like a shield, right? The best way to think about it is that you have a barrier that's going to prevent all the floating stuff, the scum, from getting out of the tank and into the drain fields, potentially causing a clog or premature failure of the system. What causes drain fields to fail is called biomap, fancy term for biologic material, poo, sludge, all that good stuff. The baffle helps to prevent at least the scum from getting into the tank. How you prevent the sludge from getting in the tank is pumping out the tank regularly. It's very important to make sure that anytime you get the tank pumped, inspected, looked at, or just on your own, you should always look to see, is the baffle still there? Relatively inexpensive part, but super mission critical when it comes to maintaining your system appropriately. Now, with a system like this, based off the access and the records, we're able to say, okay, yes, this was indeed installed in 1990. So we've got water running into the system right now, and the camera is all the way at the end of the trench, and everything looks like it's pretty dry. So that's a step in the right direction, right? With these older systems, you have to be careful, right? And the reason why, at least in our area, they're really only designed for 30 or 40 years. Again, this house is from the 1900s, but the system's from 1990. So we are in that 30-year time period. The one good thing though is it's a one-bedroom house. So there's only so many people that you can fit on this property. So you're not really gonna tax it all that much. Now that we kind of understand what's going on with the system that's on this property, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about like some of the unknowns. So in this particular circumstance, the house is from 1900. Purchaser purchased it, sight unseen, never inspected it, no contingencies, none of that good stuff, right? Not usually the best idea. In my opinion, I always am a big advocate for you should always have somebody who knows what they're looking at come in and at least give it a cursory overview. In this particular circumstance, they didn't do that. Now, just because they didn't do that doesn't mean that they're going to run into any problems. And oftentimes, usually you get pretty lucky, right? The house was in decent shape, didn't look like there was a whole lot wrong with it. So the odds of the septic not working are also pretty low. But just because the system or the house looks fine doesn't necessarily mean the system's functional. So most of the common issues you're going to run into are going to be properties that are from the 1900s with no records at all. This particular one, as soon as you reach out to the health department, immediately they have records. So that's always the first good sign to look out for. So if you're looking at purchasing an old home, just go to the health department and ask, hey, do you have any records on file for the system? By talking with the county, you're able to get a far better idea of exactly what's already in the ground and what's already been done to the property. With most renovated homes or older homes, you're gonna have a paper trail, hopefully, of whatever work was done for that property, especially any work that requires a permit, such as putting in a septic tank. Sometimes you get unlucky and the septic tank, there's no file for it at all. And that's where we run into our biggest issue for homes from the 1900s. So a lot of these houses were generally built on smaller lots. In Maryland, you're required to have at least 1 acre, but sometimes you'd have far less. Now, with these older houses, the old way of doing sewage removal was an outhouse, or a privy is the fancy way of saying it, a pipe into a creek or the woods. Not as common, but you did see that from time to time. Usually that was for gray water, not for the solid waste. Or the most common issue in our area is a cesspool. Now, cesspools in Maryland are not acceptable. Doesn't matter how old the house is, doesn't matter what condition it's in, you can't have them. And the reason why is, at least around here, a lot of them were in water tables and they weren't necessarily engineered to the same standards that a concrete tank, even a cinder block tank, would have been made to. So if this house has a cesspool, now you have to basically install a full septic system. That means tank, drain fields, all the good stuff that comes with a full system install. The problem also comes into play, well location. So with these older homes, the most common problems that you run into are bad septic, and they put the well in the worst possible spot. A lot of these houses would have the well either in the house or basically dead center right next to the house. Well, if you have a goofy shaped lot or a small lot like a lot of these 1900 homes have, you don't really have a whole lot of space to put your septic system. Your state may be different, but in our state, if you have a septic system, you're required by code and by law to be 100 foot away from the well. Now, you can get variances, so like you can get a little bit closer, especially if it's an older home. You know, back in the 80s and older, it would have been 75 foot, usually 100 foot, but you could still see 75 foot even on the permit itself. So you can get closer. There's just a lot more paperwork and it's usually not advised. But with the placement of the well being in a bad spot, that means that you're going to have to go further away from the house with the septic. And the further you go, the more expensive any install is going to get. Even if you have the best site conditions, you're still probably looking between $15,000 and $20,000 to put in a new septic system. If you have terrible site conditions, it can go anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000, depending on the type of soil, distance, and what other type of issues you have to deal with on that specific property. The most common thing I usually recommend, though, is if you're going to buy a house sight unseen, you're going to probably want to stick to the 1980s or higher, at least when it comes to well and septic. If you go older than that, unless you know that you have county records and you know that everything's working, you're kind of taking a big gamble. The gamble is mostly going to be that you're replacing bits and pieces. If you're going to do this, just make sure you have somebody look at it. A septic inspection is really not that expensive. It's worth every penny to have somebody take a look. I hope that you found this informative. If you gained any value out of this, or maybe you gained some kind of insight, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I have videos posted every day on the world of well and septic. Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to buy a house sight unseen? No idea what you're working with? Did it work out? Did it not work out? What did you run into? Leave that comment, tell your story, share it with everybody else. There's tons of people that watch these, and your story might help somebody who's going through the same problem figure out how they want to address whatever it is. I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow. I'll see you next time.